we've been doing grazing training for 20 years, and I think that there's some areas that we can improve on. So I'm really keen on making sure that people will have enough information and enough things to look at, because a lot of those indicators change when you go from, say, sort of a loose rotation or set stocking to planned grazing. So I'm trying to demystify that, show that it is science that's actually driving that. So we do things like trial areas, get people to practice in trial areas so they don't damage the business, and then give them enough information and photo standards so that it's an easy, smooth shift, making sure that they get really good animal performance so that we, at the same time that the land's regenerating.
Hi, my name is James Thole, and I came to Southwest Victoria, Australia to learn about planned grazing and managing holistically with Graham Hand. I'm a complete novice when it comes to grazing and working with cattle, and Graham took on the challenge of giving me the tools necessary to leave his place in a few weeks' time and be able to run livestock successfully with little inputs while regenerating the land. What Graham really wants to show is that grazing is not an art form. It's a learned skill that anyone with the correct tools can learn to do in a very short time. Graham has created a daily checklist which allows the grazer to have a record of key indicators which will tell him or her whether or not they are on track or need to make adjustments. This is great for beginners or people who are changing their grazing to a regenerative grazing approach. After you use the checklist for a week or so, it will become ingrained and you don't necessarily need to bring it and mark it every time. But if you're starting out on new land, keeping a steady record with the checklist for the first year would be a great way to better understand the land function and help you design improved grazing plans for the following years. This presentation will focus on categories on the checklist to give you a better understanding of each one. Gut feel is one of the leading indicators for animal performance. Gut feel tells you whether or not the livestock are getting enough to eat. You can check gut feel by looking at the left-hand side of the animal between the last rib, the backbone, and the hip bone. Graham has developed a scoring system for this. Score 1. The animal's left-hand side is deeply sunken between the hip bone and the ribs. The animal has eaten little or nothing, which could be due to sudden illness, insufficient feed, or a mismatch between rumen flora and feed available. Score 2. The animal's left-hand side is deeply sunken between the hip bone and the ribs. This is a sign of insufficient food intake or a rate of passage that is too high. Score 3. The animal's left-hand side is slightly sunken between the hip bone and the ribs. This is the lowest score for animals on well-recovered grass. Generally, when a portion of the mob is at score 3, it is time to move to the next paddock. Score 4. The animal's left-hand side is not sunken between the hip bone and the ribs. This is the correct score for a portion of the mob on well-recovered grass. Animals will generally be maintaining or increasing in condition. Score 5. The animal's left-hand side is proud or convex between the hip bone and the ribs. This is the correct score for animals on well-recovered grass and show a good match between rumen condition and food available. Animals will generally be increasing in condition. So one of the things when you're reeling your tape, you want to reel up so when you're looking you can see the cow's left side so you can check the gut feel. Okay, so that's why we set the reels down here. When the cows move this way we can look at their left side. You can see that now. If gut fills are low, it will be necessary to take corrective action. One reason the gut fill could be low is because the animals aren't eating enough with a combination of low energy grass. If you're working them through low protein, high fiber grass, one thing you can try is frequent shorter moves. Shifting the animals stimulates them to eat, so shifting hourly or every 2 hours could catch them up on their gut fill. If that doesn't work, you might try a mineral supplement with some protein and salt, which could get them eating and drinking more. Another option is to move them to an area that has more protein in the grass. Evaluate all your options and keep tinkering until you find something that works. Dung score is another leading indicator for judging animal performance. When evaluating Dung score, you're looking to see if there is a good match between the animal's rumen and available feed. Like gut fill, Graham has also created a scoring system. Score 1. Watery. This dung is very liquid with a consistency between water and pea soup. Dirty rumps are seen. The dung may actually arc from the rump of the cow. Excess protein or starch or lack of fiber can lead to this score. With planned grazing, the usual cause is grass plants that are very young and not recovered. Animals are at high risk of metabolic diseases. As the animals are using energy to process excess non-protein nitrogen, they are at risk of rapidly losing condition and having associated health problems. Score 2. Custard-like. Dung appears runny and does not form a distinct pile. Dirty rumps are seen. Dung will measure less than 2.5 centimeters in height and will splatter when it hits the ground or concrete. With planned grazing, the usual cause is grass plants that are young and not recovered. Animals are at risk of metabolic diseases and using energy to process excess non-protein nitrogen. Score 3. Pie-like. This is the optimal score. The dung has a porridge-like appearance, will stack up 4 to 5 centimeters, will appear like a pie with a small depression or dimple in the middle. The dung makes a plopping sound when it hits the ground, and animals will have clean rumps. With planned grazing, this indicates a good match between the grass being selected and rumen conditions. Animals are at low risk of metabolic diseases, and health is generally good. Score 4. Firm. The dung is thicker and stacks up over 5 centimeters. With planned grazing, this indicates that grass being selected is lower in protein and energy and higher in fiber than is optimal for current rumen conditions. Usually seen when putting animals onto older feed. Animal performance may be lower until the rumen adjusts or younger grass is provided. Score 5. Biscuit-like. This dung appears as a firm biscuit-like stack. With planned grazing, this generally indicates that grass being selected is low in protein and energy and high in fiber, usually seen when putting animals onto very old feed or leaving them to clean up plant material that would be best trampled onto the soil surface. Animal performance is usually low. Dehydration would contribute to the score. Cows with a digestive blockage may exhibit this score. Animals at risk of rapidly losing condition and having associated health problems. Water quality can also affect dung scores. If the water quality is poor, animals can become dehydrated, which affects the gut fill and consistency of their dung, which makes it difficult to assess the feed quality and quantity. If the animal's dung is runny or watery, we know the rumen is not matching well with the feed, and likely the case is they are eating very young grass that is not yet recovered. In this case, it's usually better to move them on to more mature, recovered grass. If the dung is too firm and biscuit-like, we know the grass they're eating is lower in protein and energy. Sometimes the animal's rumen will adjust, but if not, it could be better to move on to slightly younger, recovered grass that has more available energy, or try adding a supplement. When planning your paddocks, you will always need to keep in mind your water points. Once you're set up, maintaining quality water is essential for animal health and performance. An indicator of poor water quality would be animals snuffling and walking away after a few gulps. To improve poor water quality, increase the amount of air or aeration getting into the water supply. Smaller top feed troughs rather than larger troughs that fill from the bottom are easier to work with when your goal is to keep fresh aerated water available for your animals. Contentment indicator is a great way to judge how the animals are feeling. Why would you care about how they feel? Well, if they're agitated and yelling or mooing when you arrive, it's an indicator that your timing may be off in some regards. Usually when you're doing multiple short moves in a day, if you get the timing right, the animals will have a good contentment score when you arrive to shift them. If it's too high, then you're too early and you can leave them longer. If it's low, this could be an indicator that there was not enough grass for them, or something else like a cow or calf has crossed the fence and it's separated from the mob. We've developed a scoring system with some things to look for when considering contentment. Score 1, standing, yelling, or mooing. Most are agitated. Score 2, standing, no cud chewing, moderately agitated. Score 3, standing, 50% chewing cud, bright. Score 4, some sitting, chewing cud, bright and relaxed. Score 5, majority sitting, chewing cud, bright and relaxed. Keeping track of animal moves within a particular paddock is going to keep you on track with your grazing chart. When you create your grazing plan, you're going to need to calculate the average number of grazing days in each paddock. A simple equation will give you the average number of grazing days. Recovery time, 180 days, divided by the number of paddocks minus 1 equals the average grazing days per paddock. You subtract 1 because you don't count the one you're in now or the one you're starting out in. Graham has found that 180 days of recovery time is a good benchmark to start with. Once you have your average grazing days, you'll need to adjust it depending on the size of each paddock along with the quality of each paddock. Smaller paddocks equal fewer grazing days and vice versa. Poor quality paddocks equal fewer grazing days and vice versa. The first year will be the most important year as you will learn the land. Keeping accurate details on your daily checklist for each paddock will give you invaluable information during your planning process. Recovery is essential when it comes to holistic planned grazing. Graham argues recovery is our greatest tool. Perennial grasses are considered recovered when they contain fresh litter. This is dead yellow leaves still attached to the plants, and no evidence of previous grazing such as chewed tips. Graham has also created a scoring system for this. Score 1. Perennial grasses have tips chewed off, sometimes yellowish green color, no fresh yellow litter, excess non-protein nitrogen, low dung scores. Metabolic diseases can be a problem, seasonal germination of annual forbs, pasture requires resowing every few years, very poor landscape function. Score 2. Some perennial grasses have tips chewed off, sometimes good green color, no fresh yellow litter, 2.5 to 3 leaf grazing, dairy grazing, excess non-protein nitrogen, low dung scores. Metabolic diseases can be a problem, seasonal germination of annual forbs, pasture requires resowing every few years, poor landscape function, and low perennial diversity. Score 3. All tips of perennial grasses replaced. Good green color, small amount of fresh yellow litter, not enough to cover the ground 100%, better balance of protein and energy, good dung scores. Metabolic diseases not a problem, very few annual forbs and weeds, pasture does not require resowing, produces moderate landscape function and building perennial diversity. Score 4. All tips of perennial grasses replaced, good green color, reasonable amount of fresh yellow litter will cover the ground 100%. Better balance of protein and energy, good dung scores. Metabolic diseases not a problem. No annual forbs or weeds. Pasture does not require resowing. Produces good landscape function and building perennial diversity. Score 5. All tips of perennial grasses replaced. Good green color. Large amount of fresh yellow litter will build litter bank. Better balance of protein and energy. Generally good dung scores. High dung scores possible, therefore close monitoring and adjustment required. Metabolic disease is not a problem. No annual forbs or weeds. At low stock density, woody types may increase. Pasture does not require resowing. Produces excellent landscape function and building perennial diversity.
For people to be successful on the land and to be regenerating the land so that we have a future for our children and everyone else's children, I think we need to be making it incredibly easy for people to adopt planned grazing. So that demystifying, stopping it being an art, being something incredibly teachable and learnable, I think is sort of what drives me to develop a lot of the materials we're developing. I can remember when I first went over to the US to be trained by Alan Savory, I was a bit disappointed to hear that there was a lot of people trained, but not many successful. So I've been sort of saying, well, you know, like, how do we change that? What is it that's sort of meaning that the message doesn't get through? I have a thing that it's sort of a universal that people struggle to adopt and be successful with planned grazing. And success is measured by them, not by me. So their land needs to be improving, their financial situation needs to be improving, and their quality of life needs to be improving. So if that's improving based on them, then I think that's a great measure of success. And I'm not sure we always get that. So I've been using Australian science, landscape function, that's developed by David Tongway, and combining that with a lot of Alan's resources, and also developing new checklists based on work that's out there, sort of thing, on animal behaviour. So Temple Grandin's work, the dairy industry's understanding of rumens and gut fill and dung scores and all that sort of thing, and just combining it into simple scoring and that. But my big breakthrough is actually combining developing a recovery scale for perennial grasses that rapidly increase landscape function. So when we do that, and we've got multiple sites, you know, probably over 100 sites that have been managed like that in Australia, and they're overwhelmingly the land health improves. So the water infiltration, the nutrient cycling, all those processes, the diversity of the perennial grasses all improve. So I just think that it's very logical that if multiple people aren't improving, then it's the way we're teaching. So I'm working on that part of it and sort of trying to make it the science of grazing rather than the art of grazing.
Great. Yeah. So I've been with you for about 5 weeks, and one of the most useful tools that you've introduced to me as a complete novice grazer is the daily checklist.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure, James. Only 5 weeks, it seems longer. The daily checklist is actually a way of transitioning people through from a effortful understanding of what we need to do to that intuitive sort of expertise. So you need a lot of feedback. So when we're training people here at Inverary, we get them to do multiple moves so that they're getting a lot of feedback. But you can actually get tied up in actually just shifting the animals when you're doing that. And I found that if you have a checklist, you actually develop a scoring and a language and a whole system that people can quickly and easily walk into a paddock and say, well, it's not perfect, but it's close enough today. Or, well, no, it actually needs corrective action, and what corrective action could I take? So on that checklist, you know, we have things from checking the water, the way they're drinking, are the grasses recovered in front of them, are the animals going well, so contentment score, gut fill, dung score. So it's that whole package. But when you first start, it's almost a bit too much without a checklist. If you sit there and systematically do it a few times, it appears that people get that really quickly. And I find that you know, my claim for when people come here is that I can teach you in a couple of weeks what would take a year to learn in other ways. So that's sort of my focus, so that we can rapidly train people in the regenerative way of grazing, planned grazing, as developed by Alan Savory.
Thanks for watching, and I hope this was helpful. When I came to Australia, I had zero experience with grazing and livestock, but by using the checklist on a daily basis, I left with confidence. I think training is important and necessary, but I don't believe grazing is an art that takes a lifetime to master. Grazing is a science, and if you have the tools and feedback loops to measure your success, anyone can do it. I'm excited to be a part of the next generation of farmers who want to raise healthy and nutrient-dense animals while at the same time regenerating the land. Thanks for watching, and happy grazing.
Bye.